Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this inaugural conversation. And thank you to DA Clark for participating in this important conversation on decriminalizing mental health. I would also like to acknowledge the Greenburger Center for the work they have done to pull together this event, but also to highlight the critical issue of how do we avoid criminalizing and punishing people with mental health needs. Last summer, I had the privilege of collaborating with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, to convene elected officials, advocates, DAs, researchers, community leaders, and other criminal justice leaders from across the country to talk about the future of public safety. Out of this series of conversations and meetings, we produced a report on the future of public safety, which acknowledged that law enforcement and the criminal justice system are too frequently called upon to address people with unmet mental health needs. And I keep emphasizing the word needs because it's not criminal behavior, it's mental health needs. The consensus of this impressive group of leaders who participated in the Future of Public Safety convenings was that we need to reorient our society to treat mental illness and the related issues of substance misuse, homelessness, and treat these with services rather than a criminal justice response. And I know that DA Clark is in agreement with us on this point because she said as much in her 2019 plan, A Safer Bronx Through Fair Justice. I'm grateful that the criminal justice leaders in New York City, including District Attorney Clark, believe that we need to take a different approach to dealing with people with mental illness issues that may be driving conduct that requires treatment rather than punishment. It is now incumbent on all of us who work in the criminal justice space, including district attorneys, who are respected guardians of justice in their communities, to identify and implement innovative programs and policies to help those who suffer from mental illness. I'm looking forward to hearing from DA Clark and her insights on how we can redirect people out of the criminal justice system to systems of care and treatment. Before we begin this conversation, let me tell you a bit about our impressive district attorney. District Attorney, I'm going to use your full name, DA Clark. Darcel Denise Clark became the 13th District Attorney for the Bronx on January 1, 2016, and I still remember meeting you at the White House shortly after you'd taken office. She is the first woman in that position and the first African-American woman to be elected a district attorney in the entire state of New York. She was reelected to a second term in 2019. Prior to her election, District Attorney Clark served on the bench for 16 years. She served as an Associate Justice for the New York Supreme Court Appellate Division, the first department, a New York State Supreme Court Justice in the Bronx County, and a criminal court judge in the Bronx and New York counties. So she comes well equipped to understanding these issues from the DA's perspective and the judge's perspective. And then before that, she spent 13 years as an assistant district attorney. DA Clark is a lifelong Bronx, New York resident, raised in public housing and educated in public schools. She received her bachelor's degree in political science from Boston College, where she serves as a member of its board of trustees, and earned her law degree at Howard University School of Law in Washington, D.C. District Attorney Clark's mission is pursuing justice with integrity, and fulfilling that mission, she has restructured the Bronx District Attorney's Office to reflect 21st century prosecution, focusing on fairness to defendants, assistance for victims, crime prevention, and community outreach. She enacted the vertical prosecution model and created a conviction integrity unit, a professional responsibility bureau, a public integrity bureau, and established a Rikers Island Prosecution Bureau to decrease violence and corruption in the jails. So let's hear I'm gonna turn this over to our moderator of the conversation, who is equally impressive. So the conversation will be led by Cheryl Roberts, who is Greenburger Center's Executive Director. But in addition to serving as Executive Director, Cheryl comes to us with a lot of experience as well. Cheryl is the Corporation Counsel for the City of Hudson, New York, and previously she was a town judge in Columbia County and served as counsel to committees in both the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. So I'm now going to turn the conversation over to Cheryl and DA Clark. So please join me in welcoming them for this important conversation.
Thank you, Carol. Very much appreciated. And thanks to John Jay College for co-sponsoring this series of conversations with New York City's DAs. A special thank you to Bronx DA Darcel Clark for being the first speaker in our series on the criminalization of mental illness, reckonings, and reforms. We are honored to have you, and also congratulations on your op-ed in the New York Daily News this morning announcing your mental health crisis summit. We're going to talk more about that shortly. First, though, because this is the first conversation in the series, I want to spend a little time talking about the notion of reckonings. Traditionally, a reckoning is a day or a time when we consider the consequences of our actions, our course of conduct, when our mistakes or misdeeds are acknowledged. It seems to me we're at a moment of reckoning in this country on many fronts. The Black Lives Matter movement and others have demanded a reckoning on racism in response to the murder of George Floyd and the death of so many others. Women have called for a reckoning through the Me Too movement in this country and across the globe in response to people like Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby. And finally, we are recognizing the results of 50 years of mass incarceration of Black and brown bodies. And along with that recognition is the fact that we have been mass incarcerating people living with mental illness since asylums closed in the 1960s, and along with them, people with substance use disorders. So reckonings are important because they are an essential part of change. We first need to take stock of the harm that has been caused and to ensure that the called for reforms redress the damage to directly impacted people. So DA Clark, as Carol said, you've been both a judge and a DA, and that's why I was so keen on having you as our first speaker, as I think you have had a firsthand view from many perspectives of the harm caused and can help us with that reckoning process. First, as a person who has sat in judgment of others as a judge in criminal, supreme, and appellate courts of this state, I would imagine that you have presided over many cases where the charged person had a serious mental illness. So can you tell us about that and whether the number of people with mental illness increased during your time on the bench?
Okay. First of all, Cheryl, thank you so much for inviting me and having this wonderful speaker series with all 5 district attorneys in New York City. I think it's going to be helpful to so many people. So I thank you and the Greenburger Center. You've been a partner with me in this work. So this is just a natural progression for us to have this conversation publicly, since we have been working so hard on it within the community. I also like to thank President Carol Mason, who is phenomenal, a phenomenal leader, leading a great institution that helps so much in the area of criminal justice. So I thank President Mason as well. Yes, I think that my experience lends really a unique lens as to what is happening. You know, being an assistant district attorney in the 80s, when we saw people enter in the criminal justice system, a lot of things driven by violence, that we had a lot of violence in the 80s and the 90s. Drugs, that was the time of the crack epidemic. So we saw people addicted to drugs. We treated it, there wasn't treatment then. The answer to public safety and to drug addiction was jail and prison. That was the answer, which I believe when you talk about reckoning, we're talking about the leading to mass incarceration. That is a lot of things that led to that. I can own some of that because I was a narcotics prosecutor for some 10 years during that time. We look at things, you know, differently now. So after doing that kind of prosecution and then taking the bench for 16 years, really gave me a chance to see what was going on, to really start looking at the individual, not as an advocate for the side of victims or the community, but really sitting in a balanced seat to look at both sides of what was going on. And it was clear to me that our society had a problem with people that suffered from mental illness. And what's even more is that what led them to be mentally ill. Some of them naturally born, some of are co-occurring problems with drug addiction, homelessness, poverty. All of these things led to it. But most importantly was the institutionalization. So when they closed a lot of the mental health facilities, the city and the state and the country had no plan for those people. So they just turned them out into the streets to leave them to fend for themselves. And the answer became, for these people that really have behavioral health problems, but committed conduct, which the only answer was criminal, it became a criminal justice problem. So from them closing the facilities, as well as having no treatment or answer within the community to service the people that they turned out into the streets, the new default was the criminal justice system and jails and prison. And that's where the people are today. Rikers Island is probably the largest mental health facility that we have in New York City right now. But that's not where people who are mentally ill or people who have serious mental illness should be. So as a judge, I saw it. And as a judge, we had very limited tools in order to deal with them when they came into the criminal justice system. So since the default was arrest them, send them to jail and prison, it was up to the judges to decide, what do we do with them? Even if I wanted to, in the beginning of my career, sentence somebody to a diversion or a treatment, that was just when it was starting out, the treatment courts and things like that. There still were not places to place people who suffer with mental illness or serious mental illness. So therefore, you had defense attorneys, you had courts, you even had DAs trying to, create something, put something together, think outside the box in order to do something to service the individual who came into the system. But a lot of times those places weren't there. And what ended up is that they receive jail or prison sentences.
So DA, what are the tools, resources that as a judge could have helped you and could help judges today? What are the one or two resources that you most needed to safely divert someone?
Well, somebody, some people just cycle through in and out because they're not getting the support that they need. So one of the things we need in the community needs to be resourced well. Money, the same money that they're spending to house individuals in the jails, in the prison, should be spent in the community to give them supportive housing so they can live there, get treatment, have counselors, manage them so they could coexist in the community and deal with their illness at the same time. Not in a penal institution, that's not an option. But then there are some people, Cheryl, who can't live within the community. I don't care how many resources we have. Some people, this is illness, this is sickness. So people need to be treated in facilities that can deal with their sickness and illness. We need to have places that are, a hybrid, not a necessarily total commitment, and because they're not responsible totally because of their serious mental illness, but to put them in places that is a secure facility, okay, because they have committed what can be deemed a crime, but they should be diverted to places where they could get the treatment rather than punishment. That's what justice would look like. So if we had those things, more resources in the community where they can live in the community, clinics and things of that nature, where the police can take them to these centers or those facilities rather than central booking, that would be helpful. Then you have to have housing for people to live in places where they could get the support that they need. They try to live with their families. So many families are in crisis because they're concerned about their own safety, the safety of the individual that they care about, but they can't keep them in the home. Therefore, they end out up in the streets. And, we have that problem. So supportive housing for those individuals that have the illness, it can be treated in the community, they have a safe place to live, and they're getting the treatment they need. Or in those very severe cases, those places that are secure facility, because they need to be in a place where they can't get out and cause public harm. But instead of just punishing them, giving them treatment in a secure facility, therapeutic as opposed to punitive.
Well, as you know, DA Clark, some of what you just said sounds a bit like Hope House. So
Yes.
it's great. We've been grateful for your support. So let's now switch to your role as DA. As the DA for Bronx County, you are, of course, sworn to do justice for your constituents. And when it comes to criminal justice reform, and particularly addressing the needs of the justice-involved people living with mental illness, you have really been ahead of the curve, as Carol mentioned. And I suspect in part that's because you sat in the judge's seat. So you released your plan, as Carol mentioned, a safer Bronx through fair justice in 2019. And in the plan, you said, quote, "The courtroom has been used as the default means to address societal issues such as poverty, homelessness, behavioral health, and substance use disorders. This must be corrected." You went on to say that mental illness needs to be addressed using evidence-based responses. Although the Bronx currently operates a mental health court, you went on to say we need to expand our efforts so that all defendants with mental illness are treated effectively and ensure that the criminal justice system is not being used as a mental health provider. So tell us again why you are so committed to addressing the needs of this population, and talk about the efforts, your efforts to expand effective treatments and opportunities to treat this population. And this might be a great time to talk about your mental health summit.
Yes, well, thank you for that question. Yes, I mean, I've seen it. I've lived in the Bronx all my life. I have seen people who, were once productive members of society, but because they've deteriorated, because they've not been treated for mental health issues, for trauma that they've experienced in the community that has led to mental health issues. And then some people who are just seriously ill with these mental health conditions. And we needed to do something more. And as a DA, every case deserves justice, but justice looks different in every single case. So when I'm training my assistants, when we get a file or there's an arrest, it's all about who is this person and how did they end up in our office. And when you look at that, that means that you have to have a partnership with the defense attorneys. A lot of times when we get cases, we don't necessarily know that somebody has suffered from a mental health disorder, or that they have a serious mental illness, because of the laws that protect people from that. They have a right not to let people know that. So unless the crime is so heinous that you say, wow, there has to be something more going on here than this person just wanting to intentionally commit this horrific crime, we have to work with the defense bar for them to at least let us know this thing happened or this person is accused of this, but the reason why is because of their mental illness. Once we know that, then we're able to look at what it is that we can do. And I just kept seeing that more and more. And when I looked at Rikers Island as the prosecutor who's in charge of the violence or crimes that happen on Rikers Island, I know about 40% of the people that were in Rikers suffer from some kind of, mental health disorder. And the reason why we know that is because when they do enter the criminal justice system and they have to be incarcerated, the mental health professionals in the jail have to assess them. So we do find out from there that part we can find out, and the court is alerted to those things. So I knew that we gotta have an answer that's not jail or prison. So that's why I really wanted to work. We need to do something more. As a city, we need to do something more. But I just don't see it happening. I've worked on this. I traveled to Miami. Judge Leifner in Miami-Dade Court has set up a court where he has people with mental illness disorder and seriously mental ill people, that the community in Miami-Dade know who they are. These are people that cycle through the system over and over. I was seeing the same thing as a judge and as a DA, the same thing. Let's find out what are the best practices, what are happening across the country where we can learn to do this better. And I thought that the model that I saw there, where the police is police diversion there. So rather than when the police get the call and somebody's commit some type of crime, instead of them taking them to central booking, they go out with peer counselors who have also gone through the criminal justice system, who have suffered from mental health disorders, police that go out, not in uniforms, but in plain clothes, and they go as a team to work with that individual. They go through the criminal justice system, but then they have a judge who understands them, that knows them, that talks to them about, you have to take your medication, or you need to stay in the supportive housing you were given. It was just a different approach. And I saw the humanity that the individuals were receiving. And that's what I wanted to do in the Bronx. But, it's just difficult. Again, it's just so many challenges. And I'm sorry, in a place like the Bronx, where we're first in everything bad and last in everything good, we have not received the resources that we need for Bronx residents. So therefore, I'm fed up. I want a city solution, and I'm willing to participate in that. And I know the mayor has announced a number of programs and initiatives where they're going to do it. I'm just not seeing it in the Bronx. So therefore, I'm going to call a summit. I'm going to bring together all the stakeholders in the community that care about this population. I'm tired of prosecuting people who are sick. I don't want to have to prosecute them. Judges don't want to sentence people who are sick to jail or prison because they're sick. They're not criminals, but they're treated as such. So the default always becomes, we don't know what to do with them. Call 911, call the police, which ends up prosecuting by the DA. So I'm calling this mental health summit of all the stakeholders, the police, the DAs, defense attorneys, judges, community-based organizations, the clergy, mental health professionals, advocates, everybody. Let's sit down and come up with a strategic plan for the Bronx. Find out what we need. If it takes dollars, let's figure out how much it is and demand from the city and the state that they give the resources that are needed for the Bronx so these people can stop cycling through the criminal justice system and get the help that they deserve.
Thank you for that. And, DA Judge Leifman began that very same way almost 20 years ago. He called convening a summit of all the parties together because he was equally tired of it. And 20 years later, not only is he saving lives, but they are saving tremendous amounts of money that they are reinvesting in the community. So it absolutely can be done, and it is the way to start. And I think I know it started with him, just as it's starting with you, with a deep frustration and a need and a desire to do more. So I applaud you. The Greenburger Center stands ready and willing and able to assist in any way we can with your convening and your summit. So congratulations. Just quickly, any notion of when you might have the first meeting of this?
Well, we're starting to plan it now. So I want to make sure that we get everybody involved. This was a great opportunity for me to announce it because we were already working on it. So you stay tuned. But you definitely will be involved, Cheryl, as so many others who may be participating in this call. We need the help, and it's all hands on deck. So anybody that's there, we're going to plan it, strategically. We're not going to rush it. We're going to make sure that we have the right people to be there to convene so that we could come out with some real solutions.
Perfect. I look forward to it. So before we get to Rikers, because we do need to get to Rikers, I want to just a quick follow up on this question of the resources that, or the information that you may not have when you are prosecuting a case. So I want to ask a question which seems really simple, but I think it's very hard to answer. And it goes to what information that you have or don't have as a prosecutor. So what percentage of the people your office charges with a violent crime have a serious mental illness? And of those, how many are you able to divert? Is that an easy question to answer?
No, that's not an easy question to ask because they may suffer from these things, but if we're not told by their lawyers, because that's confidential, there's HIPAA laws, there's all kinds of things that prevent us from knowing that. So there could be people that are suffering for it, but for one reason or another, the individual chooses, I don't want the DA to know, I don't want the judge to know, and they have a right to that. Or defense attorney for strategic purposes may not want us to know. So unless we're told, we can't. So I can't say what the percentage is because I prosecute a lot of cases. I could tell you maybe 3% where we've been informed we know, but it may be much higher than that but I don't know because we're not told, what their condition is. So, it's a tricky question. It's one that I can't answer. The thing is still, we are suffering with very limited resources in order to get it done. And even a lot of the diversion programs that are out there, they're willing to take a risk on low-level, nonviolent people. It is very difficult to divert people who have violent criminal histories or who has committed a violent crime, and those who suffer from mental illness, because there's just not a lot of programs out there. That's why when you came to me 6 years ago about Hope House, I raised my hand. I was like, absolutely, we need this. And here we are 6 years later, we still don't have it, but we're getting there, Cheryl. We're not going to give up. We're not going to give up. Okay?
We are not. There's, in fact, the more people say no, the more I dig in my heels. So we are not giving up, and we hopefully will have some good news about Hope House in the next month or so. So stay tuned.
Okay.
So I appreciate that, DJ. So I think just two quick things. One is I hope as part of your summit, we have the ability to have the conversation with Defense Counsel and your office about how we can make it acceptable or possible to have some of that information sharing without compromising the defendant's rights in any way. I'm not quite sure how to do that, but there are defense attorneys on this call, I'm sure, who are just steeped in this and have deep knowledge and can help us hopefully thread that needle carefully, but fairly. The other thing is, you mentioned 40% have mental illness. Recent numbers just came out on Rikers, and actually the percentage has gone up. It's about 53% have mental illness on Rikers right now, and some 20%, I think, or so have serious mental illness. So, we don't close Rikers without diverting this population. And I think people are beginning to realize that. So let's talk about Rikers. I wrote these questions a few weeks ago, and the Rikers question I wrote then is not applicable now because it changes daily. And sadly, another person died in the Bronx yesterday, and our condolences and heartfelt sorrow goes out to his family and loved ones. Also, it was reported yesterday that you were out at Rikers with the AG on Tuesday, taking a tour. So can you tell us anything about your visit, especially with respect to how incarcerated people with serious mental illness are faring? For example, were you able to visit the housing units that are set up for this population? What was it like?
Well, first of all, there is a crisis at Rikers, no doubt about it, and it needs to be fixed. We got to do all we can to make sure that people are not going to Rikers that don't belong there. So I've been doing that work for a long time. Before the bail reform, before anything else, I was making sure of that. And the number of detainees there on Bronx cases are some of the lowest in the city, but there are still people there. I have a community where we have uptick in violence. We lead the city in violence and homicides and things of that nature. So the people who are apprehended for those types of crimes are the ones that are more likely than not are the ones that are being housed at Rikers. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a safe place for them to be detained. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be treated humanely. If they have to be there, then they need to be treated humanely, and it needs to be safe, not only for them, but also the officers that work there. So when we went there, it was very alarming, to see what's happening there. The parts that we were able to visit was the intake part, because that's where the biggest problem has been recently. So with the push to close Rikers Island, that means that some of the jails on Rikers have been closed because the population did shrink. It's increased over the last year because of the uptick in violence, but there's still nowhere near the number of people that were at Rikers at one time. In the 90s, when I started as a prosecutor, when I was working as a prosecutor, we had as much as 22,000 people in Rikers Island. Okay, we're not there now. We went as low as 3,800 last year before the pandemic. It has gone up. It's somewhere around 6,000 now. But some of the people that are there because they closed the jails and other places because they're looking to close Rikers Island. I think that if there's going to be a plan to close Rikers, it's fine, but you have to do it safely. So in trying to close Rikers, they put all the intake on Rikers Island in one jail. and it just got too full, and there wasn't enough staffing, not enough manpower to really intake all of those inmates. And now it's a powder keg. People are there 4 and 5, 6 days. I met detainees that were still waiting to go through intake, and they had been there several days. That can't happen. So the mayor came out with a plan where he's going to ease that. He opened more intake facilities, which makes sense. There were intake facilities all over in all 5 boroughs. They closed the others and just left the one in Rikers. So no way could all of that volume be taking place. But one of the things I did see, I did not see the facilities where people with mental health disorders or serious mental illness were housed. We didn't see that. We only saw the intake part. We also saw the young adult jail, where some of the, jail doors were broken and things, all of those things that was in the press from last week. But I did speak to the head of the correctional health services, Dr. Yang, who, is from Health and Hospitals. And she was able to describe to us what the process is for intake and screening every person that comes in. So there is a screening, a medical screening and a mental health screening for everyone that comes through. And it is there, once they do that screening, that they determine what they need, where they should be housed, et cetera, and all the follow-up. So that work is being done, but it's still just not enough. They're overwhelmed. There's not enough medical professionals. It's a real concern. So until they can fix that, people are not even getting the services that they need at Rikers. But one caveat about that, which is really alarming and scary for some of those people that go through, that might be the only opportunity that they finally get to be assessed, and learn about what treatment they need and learn their history. That should not be happening in the jail. We can do that in the community. This is a preventive measure, so they don't have to go to Rikers to get the treatment that they need. They should be able to get it in the community.
Absolutely. So a couple of things. You said that there used to be intake in every borough. So do you support opening up intakes in the borough to help relieve the pressure at Rikers? And also, what are things that DAs might be able to do to relieve some of the pressure? For example, are you and others sending, other DAs that you're aware of, sending people to Rikers right now, and especially those with M or mental health designations? Is there a way?
Okay, again, we don't know who has the mental health or not. I don't know that. Again, that's the part that I'm describing. Look, I am asking for bail on the violence that is happening in my community. Those who commit those serious violent crimes, those who have records of not returning back to court, and the bail reform has happened. So a lot of things I can't ask for bail. People, before years ago, we might have been able to ask for bail. We're not asking for bail now, but I am still asking for bail because there are some people that, bail, we have to ask for it because of the nature of the crime, their criminal record, what they've done. I have 110 murders right now in the Bronx, and it's only the end of September. I've had 400 shootings. So when people get arrested for those crimes, where are we supposed to put them? Okay. So therefore that's the bail that I'm asking for, those kind of cases, not low level, non-violent. I don't do that anymore. I stopped doing that even before the bail reform. I'm also working with the defense bar because they have individuals in the jails that they're asking us, can we take another look at the case? Is the case still viable? Do they need to be, can they be on supervised release? Sometimes we don't ask for bail, we ask for the supervised release. They remain in the community, but they're being supervised and receiving services. So there's a lot of options for us, and I use all of those options, but we have to do what's going to make the community safe, and so that people don't continue to be harmed and be traumatized by the violence that we're seeing in the community.
Thank you for that. I want to leave some time for question and answer, but I do want to try and get to one or maybe two more questions. I want to just briefly touch on Deborah Danner. She's unfortunately been gone a long time. She was a woman with mental illness, very well known in the community, in her church. She was known to the police as having a serious mental illness, and she lost her life at the hands of a police officer in the midst of a mental health crisis when they responded. And in response to Deborah Danner's death and many others since then, the mayor has over time instituted several programs to try and address this problem, including more ACT or assertive community treatment programs, which are programs that have professionals that go out and meet people where they are in the community. He's had more mobile crisis teams for cases involving people in urgent, though not necessarily emergency mental health situations. Another program is the Behavioral Health Emergency Assistance Response Division, or Be Heard, which I believe is a pilot program where mental health experts and emergency medical teams, instead of police, respond to 911 calls involving non-violent mental health crisis situations. So can we talk a little bit about your thoughts on police responses to mental health calls? Has it improved in your time as DA, and what can a DA do, if anything, to make sure that when police respond, they're doing so appropriately in these crisis situations?
All right, look, this is the same situation. I've talked to so many family members, advocates, everybody who has lost loved ones to, the fact that they had a family member that was going through a mental health crisis. Because the only option was to call 911 and the police, things have gone terribly wrong. One of the first cases that I had when I took office was the case of Deborah Danner. That should have never happened. Deborah Danner was known to the precinct. The police had responded to her so many times, and the police has successfully removed her and taken her to the hospital where she should have been treated. They knew who she was. We need to have more of that now, so that the police don't, go in, things go wrong, they overreact. Like, the police have received a lot of training now, the CTI training it is happening, but you got to understand that the police are not equipped to deal with mental health crisis. They are there for law enforcement. And somebody going through a crisis is not necessarily, they're not breaking the law, they are in crisis. So you need somebody that knows how to deal with the crisis, not somebody that's police showing up and escalating people to the point that, things go wrong. I've seen too many of those cases. I want that to be avoided. That's why I want to have the summit. That's why I think the response should be different. Instead of 911, let's call 211, so that you could call a family. Look, a family picks up the phone, a member in crisis. Do they have to think twice? If I call 911, my family member might die at the hands of the police. They shouldn't have to have that thought in their mind. The police shouldn't have to go and say, is something going to go wrong? And I'm going to have to use my weapon. That all of that needs to be taken off the table. You need professionals that know how to deal with people in crisis to deal with the people in crisis. So, keeping data as to where the calls are, when there's mental health. Every day I see alerts for emotionally disturbed persons, as they call them, EDPs, where the police are responding to those calls. It shouldn't be police. Let somebody else go there. 9 times out of 10, people come out fine. I've seen the police use a tremendous amount of restraint in a lot of cases where people did not end up hurt. But then again, all you need is those one Deborah Danner or others where it goes terribly wrong. So I think it's unfair to the police, because that's not their job and it shouldn't be their job. And society and the city needs to come up with a better way of doing it. And I think we can, but we just have to really be committed to it. I know that I am, and we got to do it in the Bronx, because again, we lead the city in these types of calls, in these types of situations. And I want to be better at it. We're better than this.
Right, absolutely, DA, thank you. All right, I'm going to start turning to questions. And so I apologize if I'm reading, if I'm,
That's okay.
But I'm getting questions texted to me. So the first is, are you planning on having people who were prosecuted despite proven mental health issues participate in this summit? People who are impacted should be used as resources. If so, how can people reach out to participate?
Well, when we announce it, we're going to invite all kinds of people. I do want to hear people who have suffered from these conditions, that have gone through the criminal justice system. It's very much like the reentry process that we deal with now. People that have gone, have served their time and they come out. You want to make sure that they have the resources that need to be successful. I want to hear from those people who have gone through the system, who had those challenges, who are doing better, because they could better help inform us of what resources are needed in the community for them to be successful and be able to live with their mental health condition. The thing that I want the summit also to do is demystify and take away the stigma of mental illness. People have we've gotten better as a society now. Athletes now are admitting that they have these challenges, and other people are using their platforms. So we need to know that if you have a mental health disorder or you have serious mental illness, it's okay, that people understand. We got to treat this with compassion and empathy, and not with law enforcement. So I would absolutely like to hear from people who are in that category, because they can help inform us on how to do it better.
Perfect, great. Okay, another question. The mayor has reduced funding to defense providers, who are arguably the most critical component identifying these individuals, and then working with your office and providers to get them assistance. Have you asked the mayor to restore and increase funding for defenders?
Well, I haven't per se said give the defenders money. I have said bring the resources to the community and give it to the people that need it. And that includes the defenders as well. They need help. I've sat at meetings with defenders where I talk about they needed parity. They need to be paid more money, public defenders, for the work that they do. I know the work they do because I'm on the other end of it. We're both public servants trying to do the work of the people in the community. They do need the resources. Look, I have a great relationship with the defense bar in the Bronx. Despite what you may read, we get along well. And I want to give a shout out to Claudia Montoya from the Legal Aid Society. Claudia is the utmost professional. She is the most dedicated defense lawyer I have ever met for people with serious mental illness and mental health disorders. She appeared before me when I was a judge. I work with her now in our office, and she leads the way in how this work can be done collaboratively with the DA's office. So I absolutely, I'd be happy to ask for more funding for them in order for them to be able to help get the resources for their clients.
Thank you. And shout out also to Claudia. She is terrific. So I couldn't agree more. Someone is asking me a question about where I got my statistics. I was just trying to flip through here. I do have the statistics. I think the city came out with the 53%, but I will somehow try and get that out to the public, maybe on our website, but I'll get you those statistics. Okay, so another question to you, DA. How come district attorneys do not agree to releasing people from forensic facilities to civil facilities? I'm not sure if they need sex offenders.
I don't really understand the question. I need that clarified.
Yeah.
And that's a case by case. That would be an answer case by case anyway. It's like, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know how to answer that.
Right. Okay. I don't know either. I'm not getting any more questions at the moment. But I'm sure we'll get some more, but I do want to take a moment to tell everyone and invite you to a DA to let you know that the Greenburger Center will be hosting, probably in November, a forum on sexual disorders, sexual compulsions, or addictions, and sexual offenses. Because of this issue about, among many others, the number of people in forensic beds after they serve their term, and a host of other issues related to mental illness, including Asperger's. I've had many parents over the years come to me and say, is Hope House open yet? My child has Asperger's, and engaged in, looked at child pornography on the internet, and now they are going to prison for 15 years. So we have two experts who will join us. One from Dr. Ken Kruger from Richard Kruger from Columbia and Ken Rosenberg from Cornell to talk about these issues. And we'd love to try and get a district attorney also to help us fill in the blanks here. It's a very controversial issue, but one that's important and one that we need to face and talk about. So we look forward to bringing you that program in the future. And we'll be reaching out to you, DA, about it.
Mhm. Cheryl, why don't you explain to the participants what Hope House is?
I appreciate that opportunity, DA, and I'm happy to. Very briefly, Hope House is a model that really has not been tried before. It is an alternative to incarceration. It's proposed. We are very grateful that folks in the Bronx have agreed to host Hope House at some property we purchased. And it would be for people with higher level crimes who are not charges, who are not being diverted now, who also have serious mental illness. And we would be providing more security, as you suggested earlier, than what's normally provided at a regular alternative to incarceration. And it's for people to get the treatment they need, as you suggest, in a safe environment, because we know 98% or so of people who go in to incarceration come out. And if they're no better than when they went in, that doesn't do anyone, especially the community, any good. It's also extraordinarily expensive to incarcerate this population. So there's a better way. We're trying to forge at least one model, forge ahead with one model. And it really, as you mentioned earlier, has been an incredibly arduous, torturous journey for 6 years. But I think we're getting there, a bit of a scaled down model, but people are finally recognizing that you don't close Rikers unless you divert this population. And no good comes of having this population go there to prison or jail anyway. So we have been grateful for your support this entire time. The DAs came on board early, as did the judges, as did the victims, rights advocates, because everyone recognizes what we're doing makes no sense. So, thank you for giving me that opportunity. I do see another question here. Okay. It says, I appreciate DA Clark explaining the need to be alerted, ideally by defense attorneys before sentencing, about individuals experiencing trauma, mental illness, and who have committed a crime as a result. Are there strategies in place to identify and then address trauma, mental illness people develop as a result of their incarceration? Example, due to over-reliance on solitary confinement.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question as well. Again, solitary confinement is a problem, is because mentally ill people are being in jails and prison. That's not where they belong. So if they don't belong there and you put them in an environment like that, you're re-traumatizing them for the illness that they already have. That should not be the solution. Look, they're building, they want to close Rikers. The plan is to close Rikers, 4 new facilities within the community. There's still not transparency as to what those 4 facilities look like. Will, women and men be housed together like they are at Rikers? Will there be one facility to put people with, mental health disorders or serious mental health illness in one facility where it's not considered a penal environment, but it's a therapeutic environment? At least while their case is pending, they could get the treatment that they need? Or is each jail just going to have a floor or wing or building to have that? So, there's a lot of considerations you could do. And we have to continue to look at the science. We have to continue to look at the best practices about, how to treat people that have to be in a secure facility, because again, I have to say, some people with serious mental illness will not be able to be out on the street, because when they do and they don't get the treatment that they need, they may commit, they commit conduct which is deemed criminal, and then they end up in the system. So, we need to do more with that. I mean, the city has, for the most part, done away with solitary confinement. But, then again, there are people, there are people in the facilities that continue to, commit crimes because they're not being treated. So it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, totally. I just have to add one little comment. There has been this long kind of standing argument or conversation about whether we should put people with mental illness in these 4 new jails in one jail or all 4 jails. And I've been saying it's not 1 or 4, it's none, that we need to find a better solution. We have at this moment an incredible moment in time and history to do something very different in New York, to close Rikers, but to have a different paradigm. And that should include, in my opinion, because there are so many people with mental illness incarcerated, a different approach so that we can get them out of the penal system and into treatment. Because just one quick example, in a jail or a prison, medications, the formularies for medications are so limited that it's not ideal for a person who may need a different kind of drug that can't get it. You can't always get your medications too on time or get to see a therapist. So it's a square peg round hole.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to do something different. So, okay, let's go back to a question for you. Are there any changes to the law, not just practice, that could support the decriminalization of mental illness and substance use?
Well, I don't know what's, on the horizon from the legislature. I think that they just need to, divert some of the money and put it back into the communities. Look, there was an article earlier this spring, all the city had promised to open these treatment centers for people with mental illness. There's beds there and everything. It's a brand new facility in the Bronx. There's 150 beds. There's not one person in there. The place is not even open.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. Probably 150 people on Rikers that could probably be in that facility there getting the treatment, that they need. So that's the kind of things that we're talking about. So the legislature, needs to be alerted to things like that and know that when they send out resources or they give funding, they should give funding for things like that and not, to house more people in Rikers Island.
Right. And I talked with the folks in the mayor's office yesterday about that facility in the Bronx. And yeah, there have been problems with the facility as I understand it. So it's certainly something to look at. So the last question I think we're going to have here, which I think is a great one to end on, what are the 3 or more requests that you would make to the new mayor to improve New York City's criminal justice system?
Well, that's a loaded question. You mean as far as mental health is concerned, or you want my list of, I mean, I got a lot of priorities, but if we keep it to really mental health is that, that they put the funding in the communities that need it most. I mean, we need this funding in the Bronx to service our community. So 1, give the money to community-based organizations so that they could do the work that they're capable of doing, to meeting people where they are in the community. I would also ask the mayor to change the way that the police respond to these calls, change from 911 to 211 or whatever it is, to have people be able to call directly for mental health crisis, to have professionals who are trained to talk to that caller to find out what the situation is so they could dispatch the right people to that call so that things don't escalate and things, go terribly wrong. And to, really, give funding for secure facilities like Hope House, where there's that option, that's something different, that's not jail, that's not prison, but they're getting the help that they need in the community. Also, more supportive housing. People can live safely in the community if you give them a safe and secure place to live. You have case managers that live there with them, people there, healthcare professionals that could provide the medication or the therapy, whether group or individual, that they need. They don't have to go anywhere to go and get this. They can do it right in their home. So those are some of the 3 things that I would ask for.
Well said. And is there maybe your top non-mental illness related reform that you would ask the mayor? Is there something that's really just top of mind for you?
We got to do something to deal with this gun violence. I mean, it's out of control. To have a partnership with the federal government, we got to stop the flow of guns coming into New York City. They don't make guns here on 161st Street, but I got 400 shootings in the Bronx. So I need a citywide effort for us to really, work on stopping the violence, and that means enforcement, precision enforcement, as well as the community engagement. We can do both. I started a program called Bronx Peace, which is exactly that. Precision enforcement, dealing with those individuals we know who are the high crime drivers in order to deal with them, and as well as engage the community to help the prevention, going into the schools, open up the gyms on Saturday nights without Saturday night lights. Just anything we could do to prevent people from coming into the criminal justice system in the first place. Dealing with the Cure Violence community that can meet people where they are, credible messengers that have been through it, that can be there where the police cannot, to say, don't pick up that gun. These are the consequences. I know because I've been through it. So we need a concerted effort from both sides to get that done.
Thank you, DA Clark. One quick thing someone asked, when Hope House is opening, it's going to take a year to renovate. So we're hoping 2023. So more on that later. I want to now thank you, DA Clark, for being here. Thanks to your staff, Erica Bond. Thank you to Carol Mason, I'm sorry, not your staff. Your staff is Carrie, John, and Patrice.
Mm-hmm.
Greatly appreciated for their help in helping us prep today. And thank you to Carol Mason and Erica Bond at John Jay College. Thank you also to my team at Greenburger Center, Rob Lombardo, Jill Turner, Lindsay Meyer, and Emma Roberts. And of course, thanks to all of you who tuned in here today. And I'm going to give you the last word, DA Clark.
Well, thank you for having us. This is a priority of mine. It always has been. I'm in my second term. I tried to get through it, the first term, but you know what, when you take office, the 4 years is just not enough. And, every time you try to concentrate on something that's a priority, another one takes its place. The time is now to stop. I have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, which I'm finally learning how to do. So I'm dealing with the violence, but we have to pay attention to mental illness. And now I have decided to do that. Look forward to the summit that we're going to have.
Thank you so much, Darcel. Greatly appreciated. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.